My name is Brooke Callahan. I am 34, and until my 9th wedding anniversary, I thought my marriage was strained, not finished. For 6 years, my husband Adam had told me I was too cautious, too practical, and too afraid of change. I kept believing those were ordinary arguments we would eventually stop having. That night, I was waiting for him at a restaurant near our house, trying not to check the time every 2 minutes. Adam arrived 40 minutes late, and Kendra Walsh, my best friend of 12 years, walked in beside him. She did not hug me, apologize, or even sit across from me like she normally would. Instead, she took the chair beside Adam and kept her purse pressed against her lap. Adam said he had already filed for divorce. Then he told me he and Kendra had been together for months, and they planned to open a second fitness studio together. He said Kendra believed in him in a way I never had. While I had spent years making him afraid to grow, Kendra stared at the table, but she did not correct him. Then Adam pushed a folder toward me. The proposed settlement let him keep the studio, most of the equipment, and any future value connected to the business, because, according to him, I had never wanted any part of it. Kendra quietly said they did not want this to become ugly. Hearing that from the woman who had eaten dinner in my kitchen every week made something inside me go completely still. I signed only the page confirming I had received the papers. Adam frowned and said I did not need to read every page. But I kept reading. Then he told me he and Kendra would need the house for a few weeks because the loft above their planned second location was not ready. That was when I understood they had planned where they would sleep, where they would work, and how quickly I was supposed to disappear. I left that night with one suitcase, my laptop, 2 boxes of tax records, and the notebook where I tracked household expenses. The extended stay hotel was 10 minutes from my clinic, which sounded convenient until I sat on the bed eating cold pasta from a takeout box. My work shoes were by the door. My scrubs hung over a chair, and I had to work at 7. Adam kept texting like we were negotiating a schedule instead of ending a marriage. He started calm, then accused me of turning a mature separation into a fight about money. The next afternoon, I met Monica Reed, a family attorney who made no empty promises. She read the settlement twice, then asked if Adam expected me to give up any claim connected to the studio while still sharing responsibility for marital debts. I told her he kept saying the business was his because I never wanted to be involved. Monica said I did not have to decide my financial future the same night I learned my husband was sleeping with my best friend. She asked me to gather bank statements, tax returns, mortgage records, and anything showing how our household had been supported while Adam built the studio. I almost told her there was nothing important because the studio had always been Adam's thing. Then I opened my old notebook and started seeing 6 years differently. For years, I had paid the mortgage, utilities, insurance, and most groceries while Adam reinvested most of what the studio earned. I remembered the year my work bonus went toward an equipment bill Adam said could not wait. I was proud we could help his business survive a rough month. Now I saw how easily support became invisible once he no longer needed to ask for it. I was not claiming I built his studio, but he had rewritten my caution as opposition and my sacrifice as nothing. That night, I downloaded 6-month statements and matched transfers against business payments. Several payments to Kendra stood out, labeled launch support, content package, and client event. The amounts were much higher than what Kendra had ever told me she earned from Adam. Then I noticed some appeared days after money moved from our joint savings into the studio account. The next morning, I went through the transfers before work. The pattern was simple enough to see. On weeks when Adam paid Kendra more than usual, money had moved from our joint savings into the studio account first. I remembered asking months earlier why our savings balance kept dropping, and he told me the HVAC repair and quarterly taxes had been worse than expected. I believed him because I did not want to become the wife who checked every number. Monica told me not to confront Adam yet and to keep copies of everything. By lunch, I had matched enough dates to know this was not one isolated payment. Some of the money funding Kendra's work had come from savings Adam and I built together. That evening, I called Kendra. I asked what she believed Adam was paying her from, and she said the studio had strong cash flow and the expansion budget covered her work. I asked if she knew joint savings had been transferred into the business before several of her payments. She went quiet long enough that I knew the answer mattered. I asked her directly, "When he paid you to help build the life you both said I was holding him back from, did you know some of that money was ours?" Kendra said Adam told her I had agreed to invest in the growth plan. I told her I had never agreed to that. She sounded less defensive than scared. Then she told me Adam said the second location was finished and that, after the divorce, she would receive an ownership percentage. I asked whether she had seen anything in writing. She said no. I realized Adam had not just been telling two women different stories about his marriage. He had been telling us different stories about the same future. I did not threaten her or ask her to choose sides. I told her that if she planned to build a life around Adam's promises, she should start asking to see the paperwork. The next morning, I found a voicemail from Owen Bishop, Adam's former studio manager. He said Adam was telling people I wanted to take the business from him. Then added, "The second location is not what he says it is." I met Owen Bishop the next afternoon at a coffee shop a few blocks from my clinic. He looked uncomfortable before we even sat down, like he had spent the morning deciding whether calling me had been a mistake. Owen said he left Adam's studio 2 months earlier because the expansion plans kept getting bigger while the numbers stayed tight. According to him, Adam was spending as if the second location was already secure, even though the financing had never been fully approved. Owen told me Adam had already placed deposits on equipment, committed to marketing expenses, and paid Kendra to prepare launch events before the funding was settled. None of that was illegal, and Owen was careful to say so. It was simply much riskier than Adam had made it sound. Then Owen told me something that hurt more than the numbers did. Adam had asked him not to discuss household transfers with me because, in Adam's words, Brooke panics about numbers. I almost laughed when Owen said it. I had spent years building our budget around unpredictable studio income, comparing insurance plans, and making sure the mortgage cleared when Adam reinvested nearly everything he earned. Somehow, being careful had become proof that I was the problem. Owen suggested I speak with Noah Trent, the CPA who had handled our taxes and the studio records for several years. Monica arranged it so everything stayed clean and documented. Noah explained that the studio was not collapsing, but it was not the effortless success Adam described either. It survived because it had real revenue, because Adam reinvested aggressively, and because my paycheck carried most of our household costs during the years when the business could not. That distinction mattered to me. I had never claimed I created Adam's company, and I still did not want to run it. But I was done pretending the stability I provided had nothing to do with the risks he was able to take. Adam had built the studio, but he had not built his life around it alone. That evening, Diane called me. She said Adam was hosting a small preview for the second location that weekend and had been telling relatives he could finally move forward now that I was out of the way. I told Diane I was not going to Adam's preview, and she said she understood. Then she asked me to come to dinner at her house the night before, because Adam had started telling relatives I never supported him. Monica told me not to turn the divorce into a public fight, and I agreed. I did not want a scene. I only wanted to stop protecting a version of Adam that required me to disappear. Adam was already there when I arrived, sitting beside Kendra with his brother and sister-in-law across from them. He looked irritated when he saw me, but he kept his voice calm. During dinner, he said the divorce was painful but necessary because he had spent years asking permission to grow. He said Kendra understood the future he had been trying to build. I finally answered. I said that during the first 3 years of his studio, I paid household bills while he put most of his earnings back into the business. His health insurance came through my job. and one of my annual bonuses covered an equipment balance when the studio was short on cash. I did not say I built his company. I said he could not call me the person who held him back when my stability was what allowed him to take those risks. Adam said those were normal things. Spouses did, and accused me of turning support into ownership. Diane reminded him that he had called her more than once during the first year, afraid the studio would fail, and I was always the one telling him to keep going. Kendra looked at Adam differently after that. He shifted in his chair and said none of it changed the fact that Kendra believed in his future. I looked at her, then back at Adam. I asked one question. Had Kendra actually seen the final lease for the second location? Adam did not answer right away. The silence changed the table. Kendra asked him if the lease had been signed, because he had told her it was finished. Adam said the paperwork only had a few details left. Diane asked why he had already announced a grand opening date. Adam turned on me and said I had come there to ruin him. I told him I had revealed nothing. I had only asked a question Kendra deserved an answer to. Kendra called me before I reached the hotel. She said Adam had admitted the second location still did not have complete financing. But worse was the ownership promise. He had told her that once the divorce was finished, she would receive part of the current studio. The documents she had seen that night did not mention her at all. I told her I could not explain Adam's promises for him. I did not feel responsible anymore for helping either of them understand the mess they had created. Kendra said she was going to ask him for every document connected to the expansion. I told her that was between them now. A few days later, Adam called me himself. He said we needed to be reasonable and offered me more equity from the house if I gave up any claim connected to the marital value of the studio. He spoke as if he were generously giving me something instead of negotiating property we both had rights in. I told him I was not trying to take his new life, but I was not going to finance it again. That was when his tone changed. Adam said Kendra had pushed him to expand too quickly and had made him feel like the second location was now or never. I listened to him shift the weight of his choices onto someone else, and the pattern suddenly felt obvious. When the dream looked exciting, Adam was the visionary. But when the numbers became uncomfortable, someone else had always held the map. Monica and Noah helped me prepare for mediation using records. Not Adam's version or mine. The studio had value, but it also had obligations, deposits, and commitments that made it worth less than Adam had been claiming. If he wanted to keep it, he would also have to keep most of the financial responsibility tied to it. There was no magical payout waiting for me, only a fairer picture of what we had built and what we owed at that point. Kendra eventually backed away from the second location plan after realizing she had no guaranteed ownership and the financing was still uncertain. She and Adam were still together, but the confidence they had shown at my anniversary dinner was gone. Then Adam sent me one last message that week. If you had supported me like this before, none of this would have happened. The divorce moved into the part nobody talks about because there was nothing dramatic about it. There were appraisals, mediation notes, account statements, and attorney bills that made me stare at the ceiling at night. Adam and I eventually agreed to sell the house because neither of us could keep it without creating a new financial problem. I received my share of the equity and a settlement that reflected the marital value of the studio, while Adam kept the business and the obligations tied to it. The second location never opened. I did not call a lender, interfere with a contract, or do anything to stop it. Once the financing, deposits, and real costs were placed together, Adam could not justify moving forward. Diane later told me Kendra and Adam had broken up a few months after that, and I was surprised by how little satisfaction I felt. Kendra sent me an apology not long afterward. Eventually, I agreed to meet her, and she looked more nervous than I had ever seen her. She admitted she wanted to believe Adam because his version of our marriage made her feel like the one person who truly understood him. I told her the hardest part was knowing she had known me for 12 years and still never asked whether a 10-year marriage had really become as empty as Adam claimed. Kendra asked if we could ever be friends again. I told her I did not know, but I knew the answer was not now. She nodded. And for once, neither of us tried to make the moment easier than it was. I was beginning to understand that forgiveness and restoration were not the same decision. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment close to work. The upstairs neighbors walked like they owned bowling shoes. I bought a couch without asking anyone else's opinion, and I nearly killed a plant in the first month. It was not the life I had planned, but it was mine. For the first time, silence at home did not feel like punishment. Then Adam asked if we could meet for coffee because he wanted to explain one final thing. I almost said yes immediately. 10 years of familiarity still had weight, even after everything else was gone. I waited 3 days before answering Adam. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop, not because I wanted another chance, but because I wanted to know whether I needed anything from him. He looked tired, but not destroyed. The studio was open, smaller than the future he talked about. Adam said he had spent years believing I was the reason he could not grow. He admitted that calling me cautious was easier than admitting he was afraid of failing, and that blaming me made every risky decision feel justified. He apologized for Kendra, the money, and for telling people I had never believed in him. I listened without interrupting. For years, I had imagined hearing those words. I thought they would make something inside me settle, like finally winning an old argument. Instead, I felt calm. I told Adam I believed his apology, and he looked relieved until he asked whether that meant we could talk again. I told him believing an apology did not mean reopening a door. He nodded, and I could see that he understood the difference. The strange part was that I did not need him to understand anymore. I had spent too much of my marriage trying to prove that being careful was not the same as being afraid. The financial records mattered because I needed to protect my future, but they were never going to prove my worth. Adam had once made his opinion feel like the final vote on who I was. It was not. Starting over scared me, but staying tied to a story that made me smaller scared me more. I did not win because Adam lost the expansion, or because his relationship with Kendra ended. I won when his version of me stopped sounding more important than my own. If you have ever had to set a boundary with someone you cared about, tell me what helped you keep it. If this story stayed with you, share it, like the video, and subscribe for more stories like this.